SQL injection vulnerabilities and related attacks can be catastrophic, right? This is because it can allow an attacker to view, insert, delete, and modify records in a database. As a matter of fact, if you look at recent breaches out there, which are pretty prevalent nowadays, in a lot of cases, actually, you see that attackers are exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities or SQL injection vulnerabilities against vulnerable servers, right? And taking advantage of that to steal medical records, to steal credit cards, and any sensitive data. Now, in a SQL injection or SQL injection attack, the attacker inserts or injects, that's the word injection come from, a partial or a complete SQL query, and that is actually done typically via a web application, right? Now, the SQL commands or SQL commands are inserted or injected into a data plane in order to perform the execution of predefined SQL commands. Now, if you're not familiar with SQL or SQL, the following are some of the most common SQL statement commands, for your reference. So you have things like select, that is actually used to obtain data from a database, update, of course, update data in the database, delete, to delete database, insert to, create database, alter database, create tables, alter tables, drop tables, create index, and drop index, right? Now, typically SQL statements are divided into the following categories: data definition language or DDL statements, data manipulation language or DML statements, transaction control statements, session control statements, system control statements, and embedded SQL statements. Now, let me actually show you a tool that is very nifty that allows you to practice SQL statements in an online database. So the W3 Schools website has a tool called Try SQL or Try SQL. And it's basically an editor, again, that can actually allows you to practice this online, and you can actually use this tool to become familiar with SQL's statements and how they actually may be passed into an application in a safe environment, right? So of course you can actually install your own MySQL database or Postgres database or Mongo and try this in your own, but this is extremely convenient, right? Since this tool can actually be accessed online and is free, and I'm sharing the link in here, right? So now let's actually take a look at an example of the editor using the SQL statement that I'm actually showing here, right? So the statement in here is a select statement that is querying records in a database called customers and specifically searches for instances that match Saavedra, right? Which is actually part of the contact name column field. A single record is actually displayed in this example, but let's take a closer look at the SQL statement that is actually shown in here. First thing is like web applications construct SQL statements or SQL statements involving SQL syntax invoked by the application mixed with user supply data, right? So you have the thing that the application is actually sending to the database behind the scenes and the user supply data. So the first portion of this SQL statement that is actually showing here is not shown to the user, and typically the application sends that to the database behind the scenes. And the second portion of the SQL statement is typically user input in a web form, right? Now, if the application doesn't sanitize the input, you can supply a crafted, a string or input to try to make the original SQL statement execute other actions in the database, right? And that's the main purpose of the SQL injection type of attack, is actually that you escape the current flow, and then you inject additional commands to do other things to the database, right? As we mentioned before, it can be deleting tables, adding records, and so on. Now, SQL injections can be done using user supplied strings or numeric input.